I'm Marisa Norcross.
And I'm Dave Freund, and this is The Next Page. Hello, Marisa.
Hi, how are you?
Terrific. How about you?
I'm good. I mentioned to you earlier that my neighbor is mowing his lawn on this sunny day, so I'll apologize up front for any background noise.
A little bit of background noise is fine, because who knows, maybe some of our listeners will be cutting their grass while they're listening to the podcast.
Yeah, and it's a reminder
then they
that
won't
it's still
know
summer.
Yeah, they won't know if it's their neighbor, if it's them. So it's all good. I don't hear the lawnmower.
Oh,
so.
Good.
Yeah. So are you excited about today's podcast?
I am. It's the final step in our growth plan series. Except we are going to kind of do a recap next week. So.
Yeah, we'll do a recap next week. Yes.
But it's exciting to see where you're going, and I'm excited because I know that you're going to share something from your personal growth plan, which always makes things a little more concrete for me, and I'm sure our listeners like that too.
Okay. So let's just jump right in. And
Yeah.
when, as I explain the path that I took, just stop me, say, hey, wait a minute, how do you do that?
Mm-hmm.
Or where did you come up with that? So if folks will remember, if we go all the way back early on in our podcasts, I had laid out 6 values that were very, very important to me. And the 4th value was personal growth. So I thought that I would use that one because it's, while it's very specific to me, it probably is one that is most generally, could be generally applied, if I can call it that, because all of us need personal growth. And I will tell people that, so my personal growth is ahead of my career growth. And my reason for that is that personal growth drives our career growth. So my career growth would be something that is more specific to developing business type of thing, or developing the training business at MACNY, versus my personal growth is what gets me ready so that I can do 5, which is the career path. So that's why I kind of picked personal growth.
Mm-hmm. Now,
so
but
we also,
in the whole plan would have kind of like a mini plan for all 6 of your values, right?
Yes. Okay. Yes. So the final plan would really be maybe not even mini plans, but each of the 6 value areas is going to be addressed with some specific type of growth plan. And it's kind of blended, and that's kind of hard to see. One of the things we're going to tell folks about next week is that I will be rolling out a brand new teaching at MACNY in November. We'll have the dates for that next week, but so that people could really see my growth plan laid out completely. But yeah, it's not necessarily 6 individual plans, but there are aspects of all 6 in my annual plan, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yep.
So we're going to talk about personal growth. And so what we need to do, we've got the 4 reflection questions. What's going well, what's not going well, what's missing in this area, and what am I unsure about in this area. So with those 4 evaluating questions, I look at my personal growth. And then I try to figure out, what do I need to do? So as I look at it, I'm thinking, what's going well? Well, clearly, there is personal growth because I have greater abilities than I did last year. I've had different experiences than I did last year, and I've been able to roll out different programs, different teachings. I think I'm a better coach this year than I was last year, which is part of my personal growth, just because I listen differently and I ask questions differently. So I think things are going well. What's not going well? I struggle with some of the reflection / record keeping, and then we're going to talk about that in some of my learnings. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to develop a better growth plan. So what I do is, if I come up with something, I'm going to create a teaching around it. What's missing in this area? So I started looking at what types of things were missing in my personal growth, and part of that again was I wasn't quite satisfied with my tracking of my progress, and I wasn't quite satisfied with planning some of it. Hence, again, this growth plan piece. What are we unsure about in this area? That one is something that is a little bit tough to pinpoint in the personal growth area, but as you figure out, as we look at what tools, what resources I use, some of that will get flushed out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So based on the answers I had, I came up with 4 different resources that I use. And it's the interesting thing is that they actually can work their way from a daily to an annual type of thing. So I'm going to start with the daily thing. So what I'm looking for in terms of personal growth would be some way for me to get a daily dose of inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And I use social media for that. I follow 7 different organizations or people on Instagram. And what happens is, and these aren't all for personal growth, but they fit into all of my, or several of my value statement areas. But in terms of my personal growth piece, I follow some thought leaders like Simon Sinek. And one of the neat things is about that on social media is that I get a quote from Simon every day.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's perfect. Deborah Searle, who was the adventurer that rode solo across the Atlantic, I follow her on Instagram. And again, I'm getting a dose of something every day. And what I like about it is it's daily. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to do anything other than hit Instagram and have it open. Now I do turn off my alerts
Mm-hmm.
because I don't want my phone to drive my life. I want to drive my phone, so to speak. Social media can consume us, so we don't want to like dive in too deeply and have alerts all the time.
So
But whenever I power that,
go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, whenever I power it up, it's I click on it, they're there in front of me.
Do you do anything with them? Like, do you use the save feature on Instagram to save the ones that you really like so that you can go back to them? Or do you just kind of review it, reflect on it and move on each day? How do you manage that?
Sure. So the bulk of them, I simply reflect on
Mm-hmm.
and move on.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're helping me balance my mindset, my attitude. If it's something that is really good, that I really grasp, and most of those, believe it or not, are Simon Sinek's. They're the ones that I try to save more often. I'll actually do a screenshot,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll save it in my photos so that I can go back and you on an iPhone you can filter your pictures by screenshots.
Mm-hmm.
So then I can go back through, and if it's something that really speaks to me, then I'll probably build it into a teaching at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I want to touch on too, is if you really want to learn something, teach it. Because you can't teach it unless you really know it.
Yeah.
So if there's something you'd really like to get good at, set up a way that you can begin teaching people about it. So that's my daily one. My weekly. So podcasts are my weekly.
Mm-hmm.
I've got several podcasts that I subscribe to. So the ones that I subscribe to the most for leadership would be the John Maxwell Leadership Podcast. That one is huge. And that one I don't miss. And it comes out the same day as the next page. It comes out on Wednesdays. And then John also, every now and then, will do what they call candid conversations, where it's not a real polished podcast, but it's just a conversation. It's a little bit shorter. That comes out typically Fridays. Another podcast that I will listen to from time to time would be Entre Leadership. And I say time to time, it's like if I see it and it's something that's speaking to me, I'll listen to it. The other
Mm-hmm.
one that I listen to from time to time is Michael Hyatt's Lead to Win podcast. So those are my leadership ones.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the ones that speak most to my personal growth based on my career needs, that type of thing. And again, so they're weekly. So the social media is daily, the podcasts are weekly. Then I get to my books. I have an Audible subscription, which means that every month I'm going to get a notice. They're going to take the money, and every month I'm going to get a notice, and they're going to say, you got to download it. You have another credit for a download.
Mm-hmm.
And what I like about that is it kind of paces me that every month I have another book that I need to work on. that I need to listen to, that I need to glean some leadership pieces out of, okay? Or some career. And since my career is really leadership, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that leadership piece.
Mm-hmm.
And there's ample books. And the one thing that I would say, and we've talked about it on our podcasts, there's leadership in all kinds of things. So you don't need to just read a leadership book to learn about leadership. You can read history books. You can, there's all, and then you look for the leadership in it. One of the things that John Maxwell's done at some of the trainings that I've gone to is he would take a movie like the movie Lincoln and then identify, or Braveheart, and identify leadership teachings in it. So if you're really in tune with leadership, you're going to see those things when you're watching the movie, or you're listening to the book, or you're reading the book, type of thing. So that's my books. And then events. Every year I go to the International Maxwell Certification event in Orlando. They do it twice a year. One year I went twice. I'm trying to get that to once a year. And I used to go in August, and there's no reason to go to Orlando in August. I'm sorry. It's just too hot. Even though I don't leave the hotel when I'm doing this, I still prefer March, because at least going back and forth from the airport's much more pleasant.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one of my events. And so when I go, and our listeners know, because we talked about journaling before and after my last event that I went to, those are like deep dive, immersing yourself in what's going on. When I go, I'm not there to go sit by the pool. I'm not there to go out to dinner. I literally check into the hotel and I live the content for 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm reflecting every day. During the day, I'm making notes, and then I'm coming back home and processing what I've learned so that I can implement it. And then the other event that I do every year is our Live to Lead, because we host it. Since it's my license that we're using and we host it. That's a really neat thing too, because it's a full day event. I take tons of notes from the speakers that we're listening to and watching. I also get a lot out of the comments that the audience is making, the attendees are making when we do little debriefs between the sessions. So that's really, in a nutshell, that aspect of my growth plan for personal growth. It's daily social media, which speaks to me, weekly podcasts, monthly books, and annual events that take place.
Yeah, I like the way you split it up like that, because, looking at it, you typed this out and sent it to me, so I had an idea. It does look a little overwhelming. I'm thinking like, wow, this is a lot of things, and you're doing it for 6 different areas of your life. But when you think about it in those bite-sized pieces, like, okay, I do this daily, weekly, monthly, annually, it makes it a lot more digestible, I think, especially.
Exactly.
Some of these things aren't incredibly time consuming. Like you said, social media, that can't take you more than a few minutes to review those items every day. Your books, I know you listen to them, so you do a lot of driving. You could be listening to them while you're doing dishes or laundry, mowing the lawn. Podcasts, same thing. So, well, it did look overwhelming to me at first, listening to you talk through it. It's these bite-sized pieces that all add up to huge progress.
Exactly. And one of the things we've mentioned, and I've mentioned this before, that, John Maxwell's a mentor of mine, and I try to take some of the things that he's applied in his life and apply it to mine. And one of his is that he spends 1 hour every day, 7 days a week, on his personal growth.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, when I first heard that, I'm like, how does anybody do that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I spend an hour a day in the car, just going to work, not going to visit our members or my coaching clients.
Right.
So it's easy for me to commit 30 minutes, if not more. And I typically do the full hour to audiobooks or podcasts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've taken to doing it while I'm grocery shopping too, which when you think about the amount of time you drive, shop, and drive home, it's like I've accomplished a lot.
Exactly. And the other thing, so you're doing chores around the house. Now, you have it a bit tougher because you've got your two little angels that are with you.
Mm-hmm.
But, how long does it take to mow the grass?
Mm-hmm.
How long does it take to clean the garage? Yeah. The point is that by having a growth plan, we become highly intentional about filling our time in our day with growth opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Let me give you another example. So and I didn't write this down, but so if we look at marriage being my second highest value after faith. So I'm following some Instagram accounts that talk about marriage, and they're giving quotes about marriage type of thing and tips on relationships. So again, I'm getting that every day in little dribs and drabs. Okay, so part of working on my marriage, my growth plan for my marriage might be to make sure that, let's say, every other week I go on a date night with my wife.
Mm-hmm.
Well, who would have thought going on a date night is part of a growth plan? It's enjoyment.
Right.
But it also is building the relationship was part of the growth plan.
Mm-hmm.
So if you start looking at all these things, so family was my third one. Well, we typically have our kids over Sunday evening for dinner every week. That's part of the growth plan.
Mm-hmm.
I also try to, as frequently as I can, I'd love to do it once a month. It's hard with some of my kids, having lunch with my boys who live local.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of a plan. So you start looking at what will enhance this aspect or this value in my life, and it becomes very, very easy to build a plan that works, and it's not overwhelming. You just have to be intentional about it.
And I think you also just touched on another point, is that scheduling it is important.
Yes.
So it's one thing to say, okay, I'm going to have a family dinner every week or a lunch every month or whatever, but scheduling it, putting it on the calendar and committing to it is what makes it happen. And so like you said,
Exactly.
how, with your Audible subscription, you're invested financially.
Right.
And you have that reminder in your email saying, hey, you've credit, use it.
Yep.
So whether it be something like that's a reminder, or setting a reminder in your planner or on your iCal that will automatically remind you, that I think is how you really maintain the momentum, because it's easy to have great intentions and then fall through, when you forget about them.
Exactly. Yeah. What you don't want to do is rely on willpower, because willpower will fail. Mm-hmm. Life happens. It's busy. So maybe this would be a good time for me to talk about things that didn't work.
Yeah, that'd be great.
How's that? So, what failed for me at times? The fact that I didn't schedule things really hurt my marriage and family side. And what I mean by that was, when I started working at MACNY, when I left SelfLock, I scheduled my entire year and forgot about the fact that I should have scheduled vacation time and time off first.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why. So if I look at my list of values, and I had faith, marriage, family, then personal growth, then career. So career was 5, and yet I scheduled all of my 5 activities ahead of my other activities. That didn't work. So I had to learn that lesson, and I still struggle with that lesson. Am I blocking out enough time on my calendar for the things that mean the most to me? Mm-hmm. And right now that is still a problem for me, which is another reason why I really wanted to focus on building a teaching around a growth plan, because it forced me to identify and document what I do in more detail. Mm-hmm. So that was one of my failures. Another one of my failures was not being able to glean the learnings from things as quickly as I'd like, and sometimes I would just miss them. And so what I've had to do for that was to make sure that I'm using like Evernote to capture things even when I'm driving. So if I'm listening to a podcast, or I'm listening to a book, I will have my Evernote, mostly podcasts, not so much books, my Evernote app open. So all I have to do on my phone is pick it up and touch the microphone button, and I can dictate a note to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I do is when I do my reflection, so reflection had been something I struggled with. I go over my reflection questions the following morning. So what did I learn the day before? I can just look at the notes that I've already put into my Evernote app, and that helps me remember it again and go back through it. So the other thing that I realized was that I was having trouble carrying all of that forward, so to speak, all my learnings. So I worked through something that I'm going to implement now that is, so I have my daily reflections, and then I want to craft a better tool, and I have it crafted. I'm going to start implementing it when we roll this out, which would be a weekly summary where it just gleans the big rocks, so to speak, the big things that we've learned,
mm-hmm.
that I've learned.
Mm-hmm.
And that will also help me in my annual reflection time that happens between Christmas and New Year's. So again, these are tools, that I'll make available to people so that they can see how do I do it, and how can we make this more structured so that we don't miss a lot of the learnings. Because that happens. You get so busy and you're going through the motions and you realize, oh my goodness, I missed some of this stuff. What did I get out of that book? What did I get out of that podcast? Do I have to go back and listen to it again? The answer is sometimes I do.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some tools and failures, things. And for you have to develop what works for you. Some people, it's a Franklin planner still. That's fine. Make sure you're writing it down somewhere. Make sure you're sharing it with people. If relationship is a growth area for you, are you sharing what you're learning with the person you're building a relationship with?
And so,
does it make sense?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And I think similarly, I just want to talk about measurement and tracking as well, which is similar to the reflection aspect. But
yep.
Do you do anything like, do you use an app that like a habits app, or do you maintain some kind of spreadsheet checklist? How do you measure and track?
Yeah, so the measurement, I do use a measurement app, and it's coach.me.
Mm-hmm.
It's a free app. And I identify the things that I want to track on a daily basis. And that way I can just very quickly open the app and say, click, yep, I did that today. And reflection was one of the things that I struggled with. So that's something that's now on the coach.me app that I can, and you can set up accountability partners too, mm-hmm. with it, where somebody else can see what you did if that was something that you want an accountability partner for. The part that's fuzzy still for me, and I'm just going to admit it, is how do you measure the growth?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the only way for us to really measure growth once we have a structured growth plan is to, perhaps it's quarterly, go back and look at the assessment that we made at the beginning on, with each of our values, what's going well, what's not going well, what's missing, and what am I unsure about. And if you can see that you have, those answers are more what's going well and less of what we're unsure about, mm-hmm. I think that probably is going to tell us that we're making some progress. Some things, it simply doing it is going to guarantee to make you grow in that area. Mm-hmm. Spending time with a person is going to help the relationship deepen, especially if you're, having conversations and you're working on the relationship. Being exposed to thought leaders is going to help you grow. It's going to happen, but it's going to be a very gradual one. And probably it's going to be your annual reflection where you're going to all of a sudden realize, wow, I can do things that I couldn't do before. I know things that I didn't know before. So it makes, for me, because I'm dealing specifically with teaching leadership, there are many more things I can put into my trainings, my teachings, a lot more stories that I can reflect to a class than I ever could before. And the other thing I think that's good is for me, one of my metrics is how often do I update a training?
Mm-hmm.
So the only reason I would update a training is if I have additional thoughts about it. If I have additional thoughts about it, it's because I have grown in that area.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's, you kind of handle each of them individually.
You do.
Like if you, like you said, you're focused on your marriage and your family are two of the areas. Those are conversations you can have too.
Yes.
You can ask your family, like, do you feel like I'm, a more part of this family than I was before, or that we're spending more quality time together? And other things are more like a pulse. So do I feel like you said, I'm doing things that I couldn't do before?
Right.
And so just looking at them all individually and determining what success looks like.
Yeah.
And considering them quarterly.
I was trying to find a sheet here in my notes, but one of my colleagues, his name is John Griffin, and John Griffin, and John's from Texas, San Antonio. And he and his wife, they actually, and I forgot the frequency, it might be quarterly, where the two of them, will go out and they literally have a numerical metric for their relationship. On a scale of 1 to 10 in these areas, how would you rate our relationship?
Wow.
And then together as a couple, they build a plan to address it and raise the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's amazing.
So do they select one number, or do they each pick their own?
They each take a sheet and they fill it out privately, and then they compare them.
Okay.
So let's say, communications, if John feels he's at an 8 and his wife feels they're at a 2, there's a problem there. How do we fix it? Mm-hmm. And that was, so that's something that I'm trying to do a better job of with my wife is, we'll call them weekly check-ins, whatever you want to call them. How are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it would be neat, and maybe I'll have to talk to her about this. Of course, she'll listen to the podcast and then talk to me about it if I forget. But which is great. I mean, that's a super thing. But maybe we have to record that in a journal somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So then when we go off on a vacation, we can say, let's pull it out and see how are we doing. And we might say that's scary. It's not scary. What's scary is not addressing things that need to be addressed.
Right.
And letting relationships, with spouse, with kids, with friends,
mm-hmm.
or any of our value areas, letting that suffer, that's scary.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's when we get to the end of the road, so to speak, and we say, what was the point? This year didn't mean anything. And I didn't grow. And that's a tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things John Maxwell says is he says, everybody goes to a birthday party and they're all excited. He goes, I go to these birthday parties. These people are all excited. They're all singing, and, happy birthday. And he says, I have one question. Are you any better this year than you were last year on your birthday? And if the answer is no, what are you celebrating? You
mm-hmm.
got older?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, that's a really good thing too. Did I grow? Am I a better person this year than I was last year? Am I closer to my values? So I think we're done with step 4.
Yes, absolutely. And we can talk a little bit quickly about what we're planning to do next week.
Yes. So you have been diligently preparing some handouts that PDFs people can download and kind of go back through each of the steps.
Mm-hmm.
So next week, we're going to do a recap.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to touch on all 4 steps again. We're going to talk about how a person could use the handout that you've prepared for them. that are just kind of like fill in the blanks, all the things that we've talked about each week.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal would be that especially those folks that can't, come in person, so to speak, to one of our growth planning sessions can kind of do it on their own with a little bit more structure.
Mm-hmm.
And again, next week we'll identify, the dates for the open enrollment if people would like to come to supercharge their growth for next year.
Absolutely.
Because what you don't plan and measure doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's that simple.
Great.
Any final thoughts from you before I ask if you have weekend plans?
No final thoughts. I really enjoyed this series, and I'm looking forward to next week as well. And I want to encourage people, we really enjoy doing series. I hope our listeners enjoy them. And so if there's something that you'd like us to do a series on, send us your suggestions. Our email addresses are in the show notes. Visit MACNY.org and you can find our contact information there as well. And
exactly.
We'd love to do more like this.
We would, because they're fun, and I liked it too. It was just, and it's good for me because I needed to brush up on my growth plan. I realized what I'm doing poorly when I was putting together the notes for it. So great. So
awesome.
any exciting weekend plans?
No, not really. How about you?
No, I have to go out of town for an event, but nothing spectacular type of thing. Just some routine stuff, but it's still good. Well, I shouldn't say that. My wife and I are going to get to go, the two of us, so we'll have a lot of together time, which is always
great.
a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. All right, so until next week, I'm Dave Freund.
I'm Marisa Norcross.
And this was The Next Page.